Hello, everybody, and welcome back to RP1. I'm excited because today we start our new programs, both the Heavy Satellites programs and the X-Plane. We are finally out of the early sounding rocket phase and pushing on forward towards orbiting. In today's episode, we unfortunately don't get to our Heavy Satellite program launch, but we will do the building of the rocket that will satisfy the contract. So we're going to start with that. Here it is. We're grabbing the 6,000 kilometer downrange. That's the first part of the Heavy Satellites program. And as we see here, we're going to have to be lifting heavier and heavier objects. First 30 kilograms, and then secondly a whopping 1,000. So this will be a challenge. So 6,000 kilometers doesn't sound like too big of a deal considering the 5,000 kilometer contract that we just destroyed in the last episode. So we're going to do that. And then breaking the sound barrier is also the first mission in the program. So we're going to be doing that mission, actually doing that mission today. So first off, I'm just going to, I know that this isn't going to work, but I'm just going to take a test flight and pack on the sounding payload that is necessary for the 6,000 kilometer downrange contract onto our previous rocket that it like made somewhere to the tune of like 2,400 kilometers downrange, or 1,000, excuse me. And so theoretically, you know, just as a layman would just understand, is you're like, oh, well, then this would be the rocket that could handle it. We just need to tack on the materials. But as you see here, as we're trying to get enough sounding payload into the rocket, we're becoming... it's a pretty awkward shape that we got here. Not aerodynamic in the slightest. So I kind of fix it around, try to make it aerodynamic, and as we see here during the test flight, just as I had expected, you know, our apoapsis is 356, and we are now out of fuel. And this not only will this rocket not work, but this style of rocket needs to be scrapped entirely. So, for the 6,000 kilometer downrange, and to start off the Heavy Satellites program, we are going to need a heavy satellite. So, first thing it needs to have is 1,000 units of sounding payload. So let's go ahead and fill that and see what kind of size we get from there. I think I want to work in the 1.5 meter range. I feel like that'll be a nice, comfortable place to start. We can go up bigger from there, but I feel like a lot of our payloads could potentially fit in this size. We will eventually probably want the 2.5, but hopefully we can utilize the same rocket family for a while. So we don't need too big of a probe core because we're doing a science core. For the last stage, it's going to be unguided. So now we're throwing on the fuel tank, and we are going to use the AJ 10 series of engines, and mainly because I've used this once before, and it does have quite a few configuration upgrades, which is kind of important to me. I feel like being able to utilize the same technology but in upgraded forms will be beneficial to our program. So we're going to throw on some separatrons here, spin motors. We're going to throw on some spin motors because we want to make sure that this can be spin stabilized since it is unguided. But we're also going to need some ullage motors basically to make sure that it pushes forward and we can get fuel into our engine. So we're going to have this combination of both spin motors and push motors. Let's go ahead and get our inner stage on there, and I like having it all tucked in like this. I think it looks pretty nice, and as long as it doesn't hit any of the parts on the way down, everything should be fine. So now it is time to work on our lifting stage. This is going to be a 2-stage rocket. Since it doesn't need to get to orbit, it just needs to go downrange. So all it needs is something to get up there, and then the stage that we just built will get it far. Later we'll add probably a third stage, and that will bring us to orbit when we work on that contract. So for the lifting stage, that is going to be bigger than the 1.5 diameter. So because the RD, I believe the RD-108, which is going to be our lifting engine for this program, I believe, combination of the RD-108 and the RD-107 on side boosters. I like the RD-108 because it does, like I mentioned before, it also has quite a few configuration upgrades, so we'll be able to improve it as we go along. I'm creating this kind of shroud for it. I like to keep things nice and tucked in, aerodynamic, and not looking too bare. Typically, I would use the modular tanks for this because it actually comes with a specified RD 108 design, but I've been kind of appreciating just the simplicity and control of a hollow cone procedural tank. So now it's time to get enough fuel into it to lift it, because we have the ability of burning for 280 seconds. But as we see here at 255, that brought us just to 1.02 thrust to weight. And if we were to burn this for as long as we would want to burn it for, that leaves us under a thrust to weight ratio of under 1, which means that we would not be able to lift this vehicle until it lost enough mass in order to fix that. So we are going to utilize side boosters right away. This is the heavy rocketry program, so there's no point in not making a heavy rocket. So once again, we're going to use the hollow cones to give nice shrouds to our design. Well, I'm not going to say nice, just simplistic, just nice, clean, there we go, keep saying nice again, but just clean design, just aerodynamics, but it also contains fuel. That's the important part for me. And we're going to take smooth cones for the top and make aerodynamic cones that also contain the fuel. That will save us on parts because we haven't utilized nose cones pretty much at all thus far in our program. So we're gonna have to, because we have to remember that in Realism Overhaul you have to unlock the parts that you use, not just unlock them via science, but unlock them with money as well. So here I am just loading or lining up the engines. I guess I took a second there to I don't know, do something, and I forgot to cut that out. But nonetheless, we are back into the building. I'm utilizing these launch clamps. I like them a little more. I think they look pretty cool. I like the design, but as I mentioned just a moment ago, that is a whole new part that we have yet to unlock, so that will become an issue soon enough. I am putting the controllable mass in, so that way our near-Earth controllable probe core can handle this rocket. And we're going to be doing our test flight soon, as long as we can get our center of lift below our center of mass. And unfortunately, the pre-made wings and control surfaces just weren't going to suffice, so we used these procedural ones and kind of make this big wingtip thing. I want to probably redesign that at some point. I feel like that's not a good design, but nonetheless, it worked out. It worked out incredibly well. On the first try, it more than handled the contract, and I'm very happy with how this came out. So we are going to go ahead and build a launch pad for that and get that ready, and hopefully in the next episode we can get to that launch. But for now, it is time to start the X-Plane program. So obviously there's not really much that we can do as far as cockpits. We could do a regular prop plane. We do have the option of just getting some general experience for our pilots before I am in no way a professional in X-Planes. You can follow along with my builds, but I wouldn't say that I'm the best. I just want to give a quick shout out in case you're not aware. Calvin McClure has some great videos on how to build X-Planes. So if you're playing RP1 for yourself and you want to attempt this program, I highly recommend checking his videos out as well. I just want to take a second and appreciate Realism Overhaul, because that they only include the back part of the engine there, but they design the entirety of what it is, and I think that's pretty great. But anyways, we are kind of struggling a little bit to create the thin design, but I want to use 2 of these XLR11s. These are the typical basic, just the first node of X-Planes unlocked. You'll get these, but and they're powerful enough that you can do one engine and be fine. But I think I want to utilize a little more power right off the bat, and so we're gonna do 2 of them. And as we see here, if we make it a single body fuel tank, that's going to be a bit heavy. And if we match it to the amount of fuel that it or the burn time that it recommends, it becomes pretty stubby. So that's why I decided I'm going to go for 2 fuel tanks, and I think I'm going to go for the design that I started with before of thinner fuel tanks. But we're just going to make them smooth fillets, lower their diameter. Put the engines on the back of them, and then this time they actually lock on, which was nice. But then we're going to kind of tuck them inside, and we're going to make the body of the plane a fairing shroud. It'll be a little bit more lightweight than if I had tried to make the body out of the fuel tank itself. So that's nice, while also maintaining good aerodynamics. So how you do that is you put the fairing shroud on and then extend the length to it, and then reattach your fuel tanks on the inside, and then bring everything down to shape. You do have to go slightly under the diameter that you want for it to work, as you see there. It was, in order to achieve a 1.5, we need to have our top be 1.25, and then we just bring the back out. We could clean up the back, simplify it, make it neater, but we're just gonna have kind of this hole in our fairing going forward. Doesn't matter all that much as long as it's aerodynamic. I forgot to mention that we used colorable fairings, so that way we can color our plane. And then we also brought our nodes down to 2. Typically on the fairing body, it's defaulted as 4 nodes, but we only want 2 for this because we're not trying to decouple it. And here I'm using a procedural wing to act as a rail, which will keep everything straight and neat, and it will keep my tail fins and my actual wings themselves in a line. And so that is good, as well as my my top tail fin. I'm a little rusty on my aerospace terminology, so forgive me if I mess this up. But our yaw control needs to be centered along the top, and our tail fins, our pitch control needs to be centered along the side, as well as lined up with our wings for just at least decent aerodynamics. This is an X-plane as opposed to a jet plane, being that it has a rocket engine as opposed to a jet engine. And so we don't need too much maneuverability with this. This is just designed to go fast and stable. We're just breaking the sound barrier here. We're not, doing high altitude flight, so we don't need to pitch up very much. We don't need to do any banks or turns. So this basically just is a glorified rocket with a person in it. there are better things we can do on these wings. We can close in the gap. I honestly spent the least amount of time on these wings than I did in any of my other series. If you want to see a little more detailed of a plane right now, you can check out our previous season, and I spend a pretty long while on making sure that my aerodynamics are much better, and you can check that out now. And but I will spend more time on that in the series going forward. So just in the next few episodes, when we work on X-planes again, I'll be doing a little bit better of a design on my plane. This one I just kind of wanted to get out. The reason why I jumped onto the X-plane program as quickly as I did was because once we got our downrange 6000 rocket designed, I realized that it would take a while. We needed to unlock some technology in order to build it, so it was going to take a while before it was even ready to be built. And in that time, we could spend on the X-plane program instead of just time warping, a few years ahead and getting the technology we need, then launching the rocket. Because I'm really excited about the Heavy Satellites program. That's going to be my favorite part of this series going forward. And so, like, X-planes are fun. I like doing them, but it is a little tedious, and I have done it before. So I could just time warp for it and just focus on what I wanted to focus on, but then that would be wasting resources, wasting money, wasting time that we could spend on this program. So I was hoping to have satellites today, but instead we have X-planes, so I'm hoping that satellites will come in the next one. A little bit of a spoiler we'll show a little bit later in this episode, but the reason why I say hopefully is because we designed a rather expensive satellite, so we're gonna have to work our butt off in order to achieve it. But now is the time. I made a successful test flight, so now that I am painting the rocket or the X-plane, you can tell that we are almost ready to go. I'm going with this olive paint. I really kind of like this for my X-planes. I think I'll do something different. I may revisit the Goldwing family of planes and rockets in this time around because I like that color scheme. There's no point in adding any kind of science to this. You can't get any science until you go above 40 kilometers, and this isn't a high altitude plane, so we're not going to 40 kilometers. So now we need to renovate our hangar to make sure that it can accommodate the fuel and the design. And we're going to have to hire a pilot. We don't have any pilot. And we only have two, Peter Brom and Heidi Weber. And Heidi Weber squeaks in her win just by having slightly less stupidity. A little less courage, slightly less stupidity. But you know what? I think we're going to need quick thinking on our feet. Bravery in the face of danger is great, but we're going to need a skilled pilot right now. So let's go ahead and get her trained. I unfortunately didn't pay attention and saw that the proficiency training was for jet planes, and it's going to take 130 days to train her in this. Unfortunately, I don't need jet plane proficiency. I need X-plane proficiency, so we do waste a little time there teaching her about jets, only to turn around and teach her something else. But nonetheless, she's going to be our pilot for our program until we need to hire someone else. And pretty soon we're going to be working on jet planes anyway. So all in all, it is a little bit of a waste of time in the short run, but it'll save us in the long run because she'll already know. So now I'm hiring a bunch of researchers so I can get the science out. And I already had this advanced biological experiment already basically half built by the time we started this episode, and I didn't feel like scrapping it, getting the money back, and then scrapping the launch pad, so I decided to just let it go through. It gave us just a little bit of science, not really enough to unlock anything, but nonetheless, it was a good clean launch and good clean science. So anyways, I'm going to just tack on a few extra parachutes before I go. I the first parachutes were just designed to slow me down, but I realized if I needed to make a water landing, I think I would want some stability with my parachutes. But there we go. We tried to put a plane out in the hangar in production, but we don't actually have enough money to unlock all the parts. Like I mentioned before, in Realism Overhaul, you have to actually get the pieces. So I time warp ahead. As you can see, we have a bunch more money. We had the ability of making the parts, and then I time warped to the actual mission itself, because we're going to do 2 missions in today's episode. So I kind of want to just show you the build and then get to it. We're going to do a lot more build in the series going forwards now that we're out of the sounding rocket phase, where a lot of the rockets typically end up being the same thing. So jumping on the launch pad as our first X-Plane program, the very most important thing you can do is add the Waypoint Manager mod in. If you're going to do X-Planes, you got to add the Waypoint Manager mod in, because there is no waypoint for the KSC, for the launch pad or for the site itself. So your first launch, as soon as you start, you get on the runway, open up Waypoint Manager, and drop down a waypoint so you can access it. It's really hard to plot it in mid-flight. So as you see here, I select the waypoint. I can change it now that we have some time. I can change the name to runway, and we'll go ahead and click it on. And then as you see here, we're slightly off course, but now we know, and now we can control our flight a lot better. I also have atmospheric autopilot running. I pressed the P key, which is my shortcut for it, and so that's what's helping us fly so stably without the SAS. But as you see here, with the 2 XLR-11 engines, we have enough thrust that we have already broken the sound barrier. Like before I could even get the mission tab up, we had successfully completed it, and we still have quite a lot of fuel left. I did start my air launch too far away from the KSC, so we are going to have to make a water landing. Unfortunately, we don't have enough fuel to get there, and I'm going to check out my cockpit selection next time, get the Warbirds cockpit on there, because I just love the look of that. I don't know if we'll do much IVA flying with this, just because it is such a dangerous program. So much more dangerous to fly planes in RP1 than it is in stock Kerbal. But we shall see. Let me know if you want to see some IVA flying, and maybe we'll take a day of it. But I have some stability of the wings. At the last moment before I put the plane out, I decided to increase the strength multiplier by 0.2 from 0.7 to 0.9, and or is it 0.75? Regardless, I brought it up to 0.9, and that gave it the rigidity that it needed, and so I felt pretty safe doing small, slight banks, little turns, ever so slightly, and not even really turning, just kind of rolling my craft. So as you see here, the time to runway is 5 minutes. We only have 32 seconds of fuel left. 133 kilometers, much farther away than I wanted, but I didn't really test how far I needed to go. I just kind of tested that the plane would work. Obviously, we would get a lot more reputation and a little bit more money if we had landed on the runway, but that's okay. I am just prioritizing pilot safety right now, so rather than spending all that time just trying to find the appropriate distance, let's just put her down in a safe place, because the alternative is that we had successfully found the right distance and utilized the flight most efficiently, and then she has to land. So her very first flight ever, not just in a plane, or not just in the X1 plane, but any plane entirely, having to nail down a perfect landing. You know, let's give her a break real fast. You know, we can have faith in our parachutes as long as she can activate them in a good enough time and not be going too fast, and to be at a right altitude, then she should be safe. She is throwing a little bit of that caution to the wind. I guess that's where the courage comes in, but nonetheless, she activates her parachutes about 40 meters off the surface, slows down to a cool 3.6 meters per second descent, and safely touches down without destroying any part of her plane. So I almost hit recover vessel right at the top when I realized that you shouldn't do that in RSS, because that would have just refunded the cost of the plane. But since we didn't break it, we're going to open up the Kerbal Construction Time Manager and recover the active vessel to the warehouse. That'll take a couple days to recover, but at least we don't have to create a new one. So now we have our first Space Gazette of our X-Plane program for breaking the speed of sound, and I'm excited to see what we come up with next. But anyways, as we see here, the Downrange 6000 launch pad is almost done, and followed shortly by that, the science will be made. So I'm going to go take a quick look at our rocket, and I decided I want to throw some decals. It's just about ready, so let's throw a name on it. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't add any efficiency to the flight. Doesn't make it so all our dreams come true, but it does make it a little more interesting to look at. So I go ahead and put our flag, which is the atomic symbol around the Earth. Find that very appropriate. And so make sure our staging is correct, and we're going to go ahead and tool this. So that is all tooled. And then we go to unlock it, we go to launch, and we have to unlock the parts. But unfortunately, we don't have the money to unlock. So we're going to have to wait on that. So instead, we pop Heidi Weber once again back into the cockpit, realize that our staging is incorrect. So that was very good to find before too long. And then immediately air launch a little bit closer to the KSC this time. And we took the contract to make it 40 kilometers above the surface, but in the previous launch, I had misread our altimeter. We were at 3,000 kilometers above, we were at 3,000 meters above the surface, and I thought we were 30 kilometers above. So I'm like, 30 kilometers to 40 kilometers, that'll take nothing. So we are currently working on the 40 kilometer contract, but our craft isn't capable of doing it flying this way. We could potentially do it in the beginning of the next episode. I might actually attempt it with the plane that we have now, because I think if we were to just point ourselves straight upwards, because after all, this is a rocket plane, it could handle being a rocket. So I think if we were to point ourselves more aggressively upwards, we could potentially make the 40 kilometer mark. See right here, I haven't figured out that we're not making it to 40 kilometers. I'm turning the science on, I'm getting ready to go, not realizing that we're only at 6 kilometers above the surface. But nonetheless, we will be breaking some records with today's flight, so I'm actually pretty excited that it happened, that we didn't waste it, that this time wasn't spent doing nothing. I mean, even if we didn't break any records, we are still getting flight data on these engines. Heidi Weber is getting experience in the cockpit, and I'm, getting myself reacquainted with the controls of flying, and once again getting experience with it. So even if none of those missions were completed, this was still a good flight, and I'm pretty excited about that. I think in RP1, RSS, RO, you have to look at the bright side on things. Sometimes your launches don't work out. Sometimes you're not very efficient with your money or your time or your resources, but it's all learning experiences, and when you do finally nail it down, when you do get that that orbit that matches a historical value, which I still haven't yet, but when you reach these milestones, it is just so satisfying. So it's around this time that I realized I'm not making that, but I do check out and see that I had the record for both a 15-kilometer altitude and a 20-kilometer. And our apoapsis right now is at 23.5 kilometers, so we could hit that 25-kilometer one as well. I misread, there's a lot of misreading in this flight, but I misread that as the liquid oxygen was running out. That's what I actually said, but I misread it as the oxygen was running out. So I'm like, oh, 25 kilometers is not worth killing our pilot for. But then I quickly realized, oh, it just means we're out of fuel. That's fine. So I just push myself back up, make sure that I hit the 25 kilometer mark. And when our fuel runs out, I decide to glide back down. The glorious clouds of RSS Reborn. However, I did do much better bring myself closer to the KSC this time. My air launch distance was a little more correct if we had just flown straight, but now I'm a little too close, and we will have to take a little more advanced of a landing. But look at Heidi. Look at her face. She's just so excited. That's how you know you chose the right Kerbal for the job. When they're happy doing what they're doing. Anyways, I am kind of unsure of what to do. I could have just glided until I got to a lower altitude, but then I would have been very far away from the KSC, and I'm like, maybe we can take it. Let's see how much speed and pressure this craft can take, and we'll try not to be so dangerous that we lose her, but let's put it to the test. It is a little scary coming in through the clouds, not knowing how much distance you have until when you break through, until you hit the ground. So I'm just hesitantly leaning up a little bit. We go through the darkness, waiting, anticipating, and then we see the ground come up below us. Not a lot of distance, but thankfully we do have enough control to pull up, so we're not going to slam directly into it. But we are also going fairly fast and unsure. Slowing down though, and so I'm thinking, hey, maybe we try to land somewhere on the ground over there. And then I quickly remembered that the ground that we see is not necessarily the ground that we'll land on, and the ground that we'll land on won't necessarily be flat. So I'm like, oh crap, we should do a water landing instead. So I do a quick bail, do my parachutes way too late, and through the mercy of all that is good in this world, Heidi is alive. She ejects from her cockpit because that cockpit doesn't have any kind of parachute to speak of, but with a smile on her face, her chute deployed, and herself upright, she starts coming down, and I'm still nervous. Her smile turns to a frown, but when her chute eventually opens, and we know that she is safe, then we can breathe a sigh of relief. We can start controlling her descent, so she doesn't have to land in the water. She can land on that little pier out there. But the plane that we have created and designed is completely destroyed. There is no recovering of any of it. So in the next episode, or just the next episode where we deal with X-Planes, we are going to have to redesign a new one. But that's fine, because we're going to have to design something a little better to handle the next contract anyways. We're going to make sure that we can reach the 40 kilometers. We can reach the faster speeds. We also have unlocked, by completing this contract, we also have unlocked jet plane contracts, so we're going to have to create a jet plane as well. We may have Heidi pilot both since she has the experience, or we may hire a new pilot altogether. And here I am, once again, remembering that the terrain that you see isn't necessarily the terrain that you get. So let's go ahead and recover her safe and sound, and then we'll say goodbye to this episode. In the next episode, we are going to push forward and hopefully get that rocket out on the launch pad and get that launch going. But if not, we'll have some X-Plane to do as well. We may actually do a little bit of both, so I hope you stay tuned for that. And anyways, that's where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more RP1. If you did, please consider subscribing. If you're not already, drop me a like, let me know your thoughts, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.